Have you ever spent days, I mean, maybe even weeks, just banging your head against the wall trying to solve this massive, complicated problem at work?
Oh, it is the worst.
Right. Only to discover, completely by accident, that the department literally right next door to yours solved that exact same problem like 3 years ago.
Yeah, it is a uniquely crushing feeling. You get hit with this wave of immense relief that the answer actually exists, and then that is immediately followed by profound frustration that you just wasted countless hours reinventing the wheel.
Maddening is definitely the word for it. Well, today we are diving into a piece of thought leadership that argues this exact scenario isn't just, a minor workplace annoyance. It is a massive systemic crisis.
Playing out on a national scale, yeah.
Exactly. We are looking at a brilliant article by Isaac Dury from TidyHQ. It's titled What We're Hearing, The Cross-Pollination Crisis in Australian Sport.
And the mission of this deep dive is really to explore the architecture of isolation. We are going to map out why massive organizations naturally default to operating in total silos.
Right, completely ignoring the gold mines of information located just down the hall.
Yes. And more importantly, we are going to look at how breaking out of those silos is basically the ultimate shortcut to innovation.
And this is for everyone listening, right? Whether you work in sports administration, corporate tech, or maybe you run a local charity, the behavioral traps we are going to talk about today absolutely apply to you. Okay, let's unpack this. The source text drops a striking quote right at the beginning, just to set the stage.
It really pulls no punches.
Yeah, Dury writes, the hockey heads don't talk to the basketball heads, they don't talk to the rugby league, and they've all got the same problems.
That sentence gets straight to the core phenomenon. I mean, Dury outlines these deep conversations his team has had with peak sporting organizations across Australia.
We're talking about groups like Hockey Queensland, Baseball Victoria.
Right, various swimming and cricket bodies. And on the surface, if you were just looking at the fields and the courts, these are entirely different games.
Totally different rules, different equipment.
Different cultures, entirely. But beneath the surface, down in the administrative engine room, they are grappling with identical universal struggles.
And the statistics in this article, they paint a pretty grim picture of what that engine room actually looks like right now.
Oh, it's rough.
Across all these different codes, the average tenure for a volunteer has plummeted to just 2.1 years.
Which is a massive red flag for organizational health. And the reason for that drop-off becomes incredibly obvious when you look at the workload.
The hours are just insane.
Exactly. The required commitment for those remaining volunteers has ballooned to an average of 14 hours per week. And nobody has cracked a sustainable model to fix this. It is basically a recipe for a total burnout epidemic.
14 hours a week. I mean, that is a part-time job on top of your actual job, just to keep the local club running.
Yep.
You are talking about people spending their evenings manually compiling spreadsheets, chasing down medical forms, and trying to figure out who hasn't paid their dues yet.
And that administrative burden, it's compounded by horrible infrastructure. The source notes that clubs are just drowning in emails. Critical safeguarding updates are getting lost in the noise.
Compliance issues falling through the cracks.
Right, exactly. And every single sport is experimenting with the same failed communication solutions entirely independently. On the tech side, you have clubs relying on 15-year-old membership systems.
Wow, 15 years old.
Yeah, they're clinging to these manual processes that could so easily be automated today, but there's this deep fear of change creating inertia. The author perfectly describes this as procurement paralysis.
It makes me think of an apartment building where every single neighbor has gone to IKEA and bought the exact same incredibly complex wardrobe.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. And they're all sitting in their separate living rooms, surrounded by 1,000 wooden pegs, sweating, cursing, totally failing to put it together.
They're completely alone.
Yes. And the craziest part, the guy building it to hold winter coats assumes the guy building it for summer dresses has a completely different set of instructions. They are so obsessed with what goes inside the wardrobe, they forget they were working with the exact same wooden pegs and hinges.
So they don't talk.
So absolutely none of them are willing to just walk down the hallway, knock on a neighbor's door, and say, hey, did you figure out how to attach these doors?
That highlights the ultimate blind spot perfectly. Because while these sporting codes are all sweating over the exact same IKEA furniture, they are solving the problems from scratch in total isolation.
Yeah.
A sport like hockey would never even dream of calling up cricket to ask how they overhauled their club communication framework.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, though. If the pain points are so identical, and the burnout is driving volunteers away after 2 years, why is there this deafening silence between the sports?
Well,
I mean, isn't it just natural to stick to your own lane? After all, technically, aren't these sports competing against each other?
it seems that way, sure.
Right. If they're fighting for the same weekend time slot, the same limited pool of volunteers, and the same government funding, why would they ever hand over their playbook?
What's fascinating here is that the isolation actually isn't born of malice or some cutthroat competitive strategy.
It's not.
No, not at all. It is
Yeah.
entirely a structural flaw. The article breaks down these invisible but incredibly rigid barriers that keep the silos intact. The first one is simply physical presence. Conferences.
Oh, of course. Hockey people only go to hockey conferences.
Exactly. Basketball people only go to basketball conferences. They quite literally never occupy the same room.
Meaning the serendipity is completely engineered out of the system.
Yes, completely.
You can't have that casual, over
Yeah.
coffee chat in the hotel lobby where the real breakthroughs usually happen if the lobby is exclusively filled with people who already share your exact blind spots.
The structure prevents the collision of ideas from the very beginning. And that physical isolation extends directly into their professional networks. Staff recruitment is sourced almost entirely from within their own specific sport.
So it's just an echo chamber.
Pretty much. Board members are drawn from within the code. There is simply no formal mechanism for cross-code connection, so the tribalism just reinforces itself generation after generation.
But surely if a smart hockey administrator read an article about a massive membership breakthrough in basketball, they'd adapt it. I mean, they wouldn't just ignore a lifeline because it came from a different ballgame.
You would hope so, but that brings us to the most dangerous trap outlined in the source. Perceived irrelevance.
Okay, what is that exactly?
It's the psychological mechanism behind the not invented here syndrome. It's where organizations dismiss perfectly good solutions because of superficial differences.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, a basketball administrator might look at a logistical solution from another sport and say, well, their challenges don't apply to us. We're an indoor winter sport. Or a cricket administrator might assume that their community-based slow burn model is far too different from a high-impact, competition-focused sport like rugby.
They get hung up on the packaging of the problem rather than the mechanics of the solution.
Exactly.
They convince themselves that because their athletes wear different shoes or play on a different surface, their administrative problems are somehow completely unique.
Except, as the data in the article clearly shows us, they aren't unique at all.
Right.
The underlying mechanisms of human capital management, internal communication, and technology adoption, they are fundamentally universal.
The tribal ego is convincing them they are special while they are all quietly drowning in the exact same 14-hour-a-week administrative swamp.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the cost of this siloed thinking isn't just some abstract missed opportunity. It is millions of dollars and years of wasted effort.
Yes, the tangible cost is staggering.
The source dives into some tangible case studies where knowledge didn't transfer and the massive inefficiencies that created. Let's look at participation programs first. The participation program example is a brilliant illustration of this waste. The source points to the Australian Football League's OSCIC program, which is widely recognized as one of the most successful grassroots participation models in the country.
Yeah, the article actually uses a pretty edgy comparison to describe the mechanics of why OSCIC works so well. It compares it to the drug dealer model or how Amazon Web Services operates with massive free credits for startups.
Right, get them in the door early.
Exactly. You offer a very low barrier entry, you provide an incredibly high value early experience, and you get them hooked into your ecosystem for the long term.
Administratively, it's a highly effective behavioral funnel. The underlying principle, removing friction at the entry point to maximize lifetime value, it applies across literally any code.
Right.
Yet the article asks the hard questions. Has tennis deeply studied OSCIC? Has basketball? Has hockey? The reality is that most haven't.
If you are sitting in corporate tech listening to this, OSCIC isn't a sports program. It's a freemium sauce onboarding funnel.
Oh, absolutely.
And the fact that other sports are ignoring it is like a modern tech startup refusing to offer a free trial because they aren't Spotify.
Yes.
Instead of adapting a psychological model that clearly works, Other sports are building their own learn play programs entirely from scratch. They are spending money and time making the exact same mistakes the AFL made 2 decades ago.
It was a phenomenal waste of resources, and that exact same pattern of isolated failure gets even more destructive when you look at the second case study, officiating.
Oh yeah, the referee shortage.
Exactly. Officiating is arguably the biggest crisis point across the entire sporting sector right now. Every single code is hitting a wall with this.
What are they struggling with specifically?
Well, they struggle with recruiting enough officials, retaining them when they inevitably face abuse and burnout from the sidelines, managing the ballooning training costs, and trying to create a legitimate, visible pathway from local weekend matches all the way to the elite level.
And as the article points out, the tragedy here isn't a lack of solutions, it's the fragmented success. Like, basketball might have invested a massive chunk of their budget and created a brilliant, highly converting recruitment video campaign. Meanwhile, the AFL might have spent years and millions of dollars developing highly effective abuse prevention protocols.
And rugby might have perfected the elite development pathway.
Right. If they just shared those puzzle pieces, every single code could assemble the full picture and leapfrog ahead instantly.
Let's dig into the mechanism of that transfer for a second. The AFL's abuse protocol works on the principles of behavioral de-escalation and clear boundary setting.
Okay.
Human behavior doesn't magically change from a grass field to a hardwood court. A parent yelling at a referee is the same psychological event regardless of the sport.
It's universal.
That's the core blind spot. These administrators think they are managing sports, but they are actually managing human psychology. Because they don't share these behavioral protocols, they each waste years and massive portions of their budget trying to figure out all the other pieces independently.
Which brings us perfectly to the third and honestly most urgent case study in the article, the technology adoption gap.
Ah, yes.
So specifically, how these silos are handling the current wave of artificial intelligence. This isn't a theoretical problem for 5 years from now. This is hitting the sector right this second.
We are seeing the exact same pattern of isolation play out with AI, but on a much faster timeline. Some codes are totally paralyzed by policy concerns, data privacy fears, and just general fear of the unknown.
So stuck in the mud.
Yeah, right. But others are experimenting aggressively, trying to figure out how to leverage large language models to reduce that 14-hour volunteer burden we talked about earlier.
The author makes a brilliant point here. If a sport like cricket builds a successful prompt engineering curriculum for its administrators, like teaching them how to use AI to draft newsletters, summarize compliance updates, or sort through medical forms.
Swimming shouldn't start from scratch.
Exactly. Swimming shouldn't spend 2 years designing their own AI curriculum. They should just steal cricket's program immediately. If rugby figures out a smart governance policy to handle the shadow IT problem of staff using ChatGPT on the sly, everyone else should just copy and paste that policy tomorrow.
Because if they don't, the inefficiency compounds exponentially. Let's trace what happens if they stay in their silos. Every code will spend 2 to 3 years figuring out AI independently.
Right.
The fast movers will leapfrog ahead and drastically reduce their administrative overhead. The slow movers will fall way behind and watch their volunteers burn out even faster.
And
Eventually, after massive struggle, they will all arrive at very similar solutions for how to use AI for data entry and communication. They'll just do it years apart, having collectively spent millions of dollars more than necessary. It's an entirely preventable sector-wide tax on inefficiency.
If this isolated approach is costing millions of dollars and causing these brutal 14-hour volunteer work weeks, why hasn't natural evolution killed off this behavior? How do we forcefully break the cycle?
Well, the article doesn't just diagnose the illness, it offers a highly specific treatment plan.
And it starts with a concept I absolutely love: forced cross-pollination.
The key word there is forced. Because, as we've established, the natural resting state of these organizations is isolated tribalism. To break that, you have to engineer collisions.
Yeah.
The article shares a fascinating anecdote about an ad hoc room that proves just how quickly this dynamic can change when you alter the environment.
The mid-year summit up on the Sunshine Coast. The setup was brilliantly simple. They took just 20 or 25 administrators from entirely different sports and locked them in a room for 48 hours under Chatham House rules.
Right. And for those unfamiliar, Chatham House rules mean you are free to use the information you hear, but you cannot reveal who said it or what organization they belong to.
It creates a completely safe space for vulnerability.
And crucially, they stripped away all the standard conference baggage. There were no polished presentations, no vendor sales pitches.
No sponsor banners.
Exactly. Just a raw, honest conversation structured around the single vulnerable premise.
Yeah.
Here is the massive administrative challenge I'm facing right now, and I am stuck. What have you tried?
The result was pure magic. Within hours, the hockey administrator realizes that the basketball administrator cracked their exact retention problem 2 years ago.
Amazing.
The rugby person learns a safeguarding process from swimming that is infinitely more efficient than their current manual system. By stripping away the superficial differences of the sports, they achieve more actual knowledge transfer in a single afternoon than they had in the previous decade of isolated conferences.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, that ad hoc magic on the Sunshine Coast is inspiring, but it isn't enough to permanently change an entire sector.
No, it can't just be a one-off.
Right, you can't rely on a single magical retreat once a year. The author argues that we need systematic, scalable, forced cross-pollination baked into the DNA of how these organizations operate.
But wait, if you force a hockey admin and a rugby admin into a massive conference hall together, won't they just naturally gravitate back to their own tribes or tune each other out the second the conversation turns to game-specific rules? How do we actually build a system that prevents that?
You prevent it by changing what the system revolves around. The source outlines 3 concrete strategies. First, we need to completely rethink conferences.
Okay.
We have to stop hosting multi-day events dedicated entirely to the sport of hockey or the sport of basketball. Instead, we need multi-code conferences focused entirely on a specific problem.
Oh, I see.
Imagine a national conference dedicated solely to volunteer capacity and retention in community sport. You have delegates from hockey, basketball, cricket, and rugby all sitting at the same table. The cross-pollination happens automatically because the focus is entirely on the shared mechanical problem, not the differing codes.
That makes incredible sense. You align them by their shared pain points.
Precisely. And the second strategy builds on that, cross-code working groups. You don't just meet once a year. You take representatives from 6 different codes and form a permanent club communication task force.
Oh, I love that.
They meet quarterly, they share exactly what software is working and what onboarding processes are failing, and most importantly, they publish their collective learnings publicly, so the entire ecosystem benefits from the shared R&D.
The third strategy is where they really zoom out. It's about breaking out of the geographic bubble entirely.
International study tours.
Yeah.
The article notes that Australian sport, by virtue of geography, can be quite internationally insular. Administrators need to get on a plane and study how entirely different systems handle scale and complexity.
Like looking at totally different leagues.
Right. Take the Indian Premier League, the IPL. Studying them isn't just about looking at big cricket. It is an exercise in extreme logistics. How do you manage 10 franchises and broadcast distribution for a population of 1.4 billion people?
Wow. Yeah, that's massive.
Or look at the NFL in America. The NFL isn't just a football game. It's an immersive, day-long retail, hospitality, and entertainment ecosystem. How do they handle fan experience at that massive scale? Or look at how European football leagues handle volunteer officiating across thousands of local tiers.
And even though you can't just copy and paste the NFL's billion-dollar budget into a local field hockey club, the underlying thinking, like the mechanics of how they approach crowd flow or how they structure digital engagement, that is absolutely transferable.
100%.
You synthesize those macro learnings and scale them down to your local context. But reading this, I realized true cross-pollination doesn't even have to stay within the boundaries of sports at all.
That is a critical insight, and the author explicitly touches on leveraging broader business networks to solve these problems.
Yeah, they use the example of a massive corporate event at Melbourne Victory with 400 people in the room from all different sectors. If you are a cricket administrator struggling with the logistics of moving hundreds of volunteers around a city on a weekend, why are you only talking to other sports people?
Right, you should be looking elsewhere.
You should be cornering a logistics coordinator from a major shipping company or an events manager from a music festival to ask how they manage transient shift-based workforces.
Exactly.
If you want to improve the weekend game day experience for parents, go talk to a regional retail manager about managing customer experience and crowd flow at scale.
Or if you are terrified of rolling out a new membership database, go talk to a tech product manager about software adoption, UI friction, and user onboarding challenges.
Totally.
The administrative problems sports face, retention, digital communication, compliance, supply chain, They are just standard business problems. Entirely different sectors have already spent billions of dollars solving them. The real tragedy is simply that the sports sector rarely looks outside its own literal and metaphorical walls to find those solutions.
So what does this all mean? When we pull all these threads together, what is the ultimate takeaway from this TidyHQ deep dive?
Well, it comes down to a very stark choice about organizational behavior. As the article notes, the Australian sports sector is actually relatively small at the top.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there are maybe 500 senior administrators across all codes at the state and national levels. It is an incredibly intimate professional landscape.
They should all know each other's names. I mean, they should have each other on speed dial for when things go wrong.
They should be talking constantly, and frankly, they should be relentlessly stealing each other's best ideas. Knowledge is at its absolute most valuable when it is applied laterally.
Right.
A complex, hair-pulling, 14-hour-a-week problem in your specific industry might be a totally solved, incredibly boring equation in another.
The organizations that break out of this siloed thinking, the ones that treat their environment like a massive interconnected ecosystem of shared knowledge, they are the ones who are going to win the next decade.
Without a doubt.
And the ones that insist on acting like isolated kingdoms, obsessed with the fact that they wear different shoes or play in a different season, they are going to keep struggling with burnout, they're going to stay trapped on 15-year-old technology, and they will keep failing to solve problems that their neighbors cracked 5 years ago.
This whole analysis is a phenomenal reminder that innovation rarely means inventing something entirely new from thin air. More often than not, true innovation is just having the humility to look sideways, recognize a structurally sound idea in a different context, and adapt the mechanics to your own backyard.
Innovation is just having the humility to look sideways. That is the perfect distillation of this entire article. And that brings us to the question we want to leave you, the listener, with today. Think about the biggest, most stubborn bottleneck you are facing in your job or your personal projects right now. The problem that is keeping you up at night, the one you've been trying to solve from scratch. If your industry is acting like an isolated kingdom, what completely unrelated industry out there has already solved your exact problem? And more importantly, how can you go knock on their door and steal their structural solution today? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking over the fence, and we will catch you next time.